Logan Carter, a renowned name in the bustling heart of the capital, stood as a symbol of ambition and unrelenting success. His days were a whirlwind of boardroom negotiations, high-stakes meetings, and international business trips, all meticulously planned to the second. Behind the glass walls of his luxurious townhouse in the city center, Logan appeared untouchable, an enigma whose every move was calculated for efficiency and gain. Yet, beneath the polished exterior lay a quiet loneliness he refused to acknowledge, even to himself. To Logan, vulnerability was a distraction, an obstacle in the path of his carefully constructed life. His existence was a straight line aimed at success, with no room for deviation. The city admired and envied him in equal measure. He was the face of magazine covers, the star of television interviews, and the man whose time management and business strategies were touted as gospel. But despite the accolades and the admiration of millions, Logan Carter remained unapproachable, a solitary figure atop the pedestal of his achievements. This fortress of solitude was his choice, or so he believed. To Logan, emotional ties and personal connections were liabilities, distractions that could unravel the carefully woven tapestry of his life. But what Logan didn't realize was that his orderly world was about to be shaken in ways he could never have imagined. One brisk Monday morning, Logan Carter arrived home from an intense business trip to Switzerland. His immaculate townhouse was as spotless as ever, a testament to the diligence of Nancy, his maid of 8 years. She had been a silent, consistent presence in his life, a shadow that ensured the perfection of his sanctuary. But that morning, Nancy greeted him with an uncharacteristic expression of hesitation. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she began softly, wringing her hands in a way Logan had never seen before. "What is it, Nancy?" he asked, his tone sharp with impatience. He despised deviations from routine. I wanted to inform you that I will be leaving my position at the end of the week," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "My children are relocating to the coast, and they've asked me to join them. My daughter-in-law is expecting, and I wish to be there for my grandchildren." Logan froze, the words sinking in. This woman had kept his home running like clockwork and anticipated his needs without fail. And now, she was leaving. "I see," he said coolly, masking the irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "I suppose family is more important than work." Nancy hesitated, her eyes searching his face for some sign of understanding. "It's not an easy decision, Mr. Carter. You've been like a son to me in some ways, and I've grown attached to this place. But family is everything." Logan dismissed her with a curt nod, retreating to his study. He had no patience for sentimentality. Family, to him, was a distraction, a source of complications he had long since avoided. He spent the evening making arrangements, calling his secretary, Amelia, with specific instructions for a replacement. "I need someone reliable," he told her. "Unmarried, childless, and plain. Someone who won't be distracted by personal dramas." Amelia, ever efficient, replied briskly, "Understood, Mr. Carter. I'll find someone who fits the bill." As Logan hung up, he felt a flicker of unease. Nancy's departure was a disruption, a crack in the foundation of his carefully controlled life. But he quickly brushed it aside. Problems existed to be solved, and this one would be no different. The following day, Amelia informed Logan that she had found a candidate who met his criteria. "She's quiet, diligent, and extremely modest," Amelia said, handing Logan a portfolio with the applicant's details. Logan barely glanced at the papers. "When can she start?" "Tomorrow, if you approve," Amelia replied. Logan met Claire, his new my, for the first time the following day. She stood timidly in the grand foyer, clutching a small handbag with both hands. Her appearance was almost comically unassuming. A plain gray sweater, a long black skirt, and worn boots. Her chestnut hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her pale blue eyes peered nervously from behind oversized glasses. "You must be Claire," Logan said, his voice as measured as ever. "I trust Amelia explained the rules?" "Yes, Mr. Carter," Claire replied softly, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I'll ensure everything is to your satisfaction." Logan studied her for a moment. There was something oddly fragile about her, as if a strong wind might carry her away. "Good. Your duties are simple. Clean thoroughly, maintain order, and follow my checklist. If you have questions, speak to Amelia. Claire nodded, clutching her bag tighter. Logan dismissed her with a wave, retreating to his office. Over the next few days, Claire did her duties quietly. She arrived early, left late, and performed her tasks with meticulous care. Logan, ever the skeptic, decided to test her trustworthiness. One evening, after Claire had left, Logan left one of his safes slightly ajar, deliberately placing a bundle of cash within sight. He activated the hidden camera in his office, curious to see if the seemingly timid maid could resist the temptation. The following day, Logan reviewed the footage. Claire appeared on the screen in her black uniform, diligently cleaning the room. She dusted shelves, wiped down surfaces, and reorganized his cluttered papers. But when she passed the open safe, she paused. Logan leaned forward, his heart pounding. Claire stared at the safe momentarily, then shook her head and moved on. Logan exhaled, a mixture of relief and satisfaction washing over him. Perhaps Amelia had chosen well after all. But the test wasn't over. Later that day, Claire returned to the office dressed in street clothes. She stood in the center of the room, hesitating. Logan watched as she moved toward a bookshelf and pulled out an old photo album. Flipping through its pages, she stopped at one and carefully removed a photograph, tucking it into her pocket. Logan froze. His mind raced with suspicions. Why would she take that photograph? Was she a spy? A journalist? He decided he would confront her, but only after understanding her motives. For now, he would wait, observing as the mystery pieces began to fall into place. Logan couldn't shake the unease that had taken root in his mind. That night, he sat in his office, staring at the empty spot in the photo album where the missing picture once lay. The image had been from a time long ago, a time he rarely allowed himself to think about. It had no monetary value, but it was deeply personal. Why would Claire, a maid who barely spoke above a whisper, take something so significant? The following day, Logan called Amelia into his office. Amelia, he began, his tone sharp, I need you to schedule a meeting with the new maid. I have questions for her. Amelia raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Of course, Mr. Carter. Shall I arrange it for this afternoon? Immediately, Logan snapped, impatience bubbling beneath his calm exterior. An hour later, Claire timidly knocked on his office door. Logan's eyes narrowed as she stepped inside, her small frame almost swallowed by the grandeur. Sit, he said curtly, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Claire obeyed, clutching her hands tightly in her lap. Logan leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Claire, he began, his voice cold and measured. I want you to tell me the truth. Why did you take the photograph from my album? Claire's eyes widened, her face paling. I didn't mean to. That's not an answer, Logan interrupted, his voice rising. Who sent you? Are you working for someone? A journalist? A rival? Claire shook her head vehemently, her voice trembling. No, Mr. Carter, I swear. I'm not working for anyone. Then why? Logan demanded, his patience wearing thin. Why would you take something that doesn't belong to you? Claire hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. Finally, she whispered, because of that photograph. It's of you and my mother. Logan froze, the air in the room suddenly thick. Your mother? He repeated, his voice barely audible. Yes, Claire said, her voice steadier now. My mother told me my father died before I was born. But one day, I found her diary. It mentioned you, Logan Carter. When I saw your name in the job listing, I knew I had to meet you. I had to know if it was true. Logan's mind reeled. Memories he had buried long ago began to resurface, unbidden and unwelcome. He stared at Claire, searching for something familiar in her features. Her blue eyes, the shape of her face, they were hauntingly familiar. I don't believe you, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Why should I? Claire met his gaze, her expression a mixture of sadness and defiance. Because I've spent my whole life wondering who my father was. And now that I've found you, I don't want to let go of the truth. Logan leaned back in his chair, his thoughts spinning. He didn't want to believe her, but the weight of her words and the raw emotion in her voice made it impossible to dismiss her claim outright. Memories long suppressed began to surface, memories of another life, another version of himself. "Tell me," Logan said quietly, "what was your mother's name?" "Amelia," Claire replied, her voice trembling. "Amelia Parker." The name hit Logan like a punch to the gut. He closed his eyes, the image of a young woman with fiery red hair and mischievous blue eyes flashing in his mind. Amelia, his first love, the woman who had shattered his heart. "It can't be," he muttered, more to himself than to Claire. But deep down, he knew it was possible. He had loved Amelia with a passion he had never felt since. They had been inseparable, dreaming of a future together, until everything fell apart. The memory of their final days together was a blur of confusion, betrayal, and pain. He had left for an overseas assignment, promising to return and marry her. But when he tried to contact her, she had seemingly vanished from his life, leaving him with a letter claiming she had fallen in love with someone else. Now, Logan began to doubt everything he thought he knew. Claire watched him, her expression softening as she saw the conflict in his eyes. "You didn't know about me, did you?" she asked quietly. Logan shook his head. "No, I didn't." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotions he was trying to suppress. "Your mother. She told me she had moved on, that she had met someone else." Claire frowned. "That doesn't sound like her. She always told me she loved my father, even if she never mentioned his name." Logan's hands clenched into fists. Had he been manipulated? Deceived? The thought filled him with both anger and regret. "We need answers," he said firmly, rising from his chair. "Where is your mother now?" "She's at home," Claire replied, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "But she doesn't know I'm here. She doesn't think highly of you. I've heard her call you a coward and a liar." Logan flinched at the words, but pushed the pain aside. "Then we'll go to her together," he said decisively. "I need to know the truth." Claire hesitated, but finally nodded. "Okay." As they left the office, Logan felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. The past he had worked so hard to bury was unraveling before him, and he wasn't sure what he would find at the end of this journey. But one thing was sure, he couldn't walk away now. Not when the possibility of redemption, of closure, was within reach. The drive to Amelia Parker's home was tense and silent. Logan sat in the back seat of his luxury car, his thoughts a chaotic mix of memories and emotions. Claire sat beside him, clutching her bag tightly, her face pale but resolute. As the car pulled up to a modest yet charming suburban home, Logan's heart began to race. The sight of the house felt strangely familiar, as if it belonged to a dream he couldn't fully remember. Claire opened the door and stepped out, glancing back at Logan, who lingered for a moment before following her. "Are you ready?" Claire asked softly. Logan nodded, though his confidence felt fragile. "Let's do this." Claire led the way, unlocking the door with her key. "Mom," she called out. "It's me. I brought someone with me." The sound of a chair scraping against the floor came from the kitchen, followed by footsteps. Amelia appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She froze when she saw Logan, her face a mixture of shock and guarded hostility. "Logan," she said, her voice tight. "Hello, Amelia," Logan replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, crossing her arms over her chest. Her defensive posture made it clear she wasn't ready for pleasantries. "I came to find out the truth," Logan said, his tone firm. He motioned toward Claire. "About her. About us." Amelia's gaze flickered to Claire, then back to Logan. "The truth? After all these years, you want the truth now?" "Yes," Logan replied, stepping closer. "Because I don't think I've ever had it." Amelia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Fine. Let's sit down." The three of them moved to the living room, where an uneasy silence settled. Amelia sat in an armchair, her expression guarded, while Logan and Claire sat on the couch. "Claire told me about the diary," Logan began. "She said you wrote about me, about us." Amelia's eyes softened for a moment, then hardened again. "I did. Because for a long time, you were everything to me. But then you left." I left because I thought you didn't want me, Logan said, his voice rising. You wrote to me, told me you'd met someone else. Amelia's eyes widened in shock. I never wrote that. Yes, you did, Logan insisted. I got the letter the day after you stopped answering my calls. It was in your handwriting. Amelia shook her head vehemently. I never wrote you a letter, Logan. I lost my phone around that time, and when I found it, all your calls and messages were gone. I thought you had given up on me. Logan leaned back, his mind spinning. Then who wrote the letter? Who erased the calls? I don't know, Amelia said, her voice trembling. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was my sister, Sophia. She hated you from the moment she met you. She thought you weren't good enough for me. Logan frowned, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. Sophia, he muttered. She always did seem distant. She wasn't distant, Amelia said bitterly. She was jealous. Of us. Of what we had. Claire, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Mom, did Sophia ever say why she didn't want you to be with Dad? Amelia hesitated, then nodded. She said I deserved someone better. Someone who could give me the life she thought I wanted. Logan's hands clenched into fists. And she thought that breaking us apart was the way to do that? Amelia nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I never forgave her for it. But it was too late when I realized what had happened. You were gone. Logan sat in stunned silence, the weight of Amelia's words pressing down on him. He had spent years believing she had betrayed him, only to find that it had been a cruel manipulation all along. I don't know what to say, Logan admitted, his voice breaking. I thought I was doing the right thing by walking away. I thought I was giving you what you wanted. Amelia reached out and placed a hand on his. I thought the same about you. But we were both wrong. Claire watched the exchange with a mix of emotions. For so long, she had wondered about her father, about the man who had left her mother. Sitting in the same room, she felt a strange sense of closure and hope. So what happens now? Claire asked, her voice hesitant. Logan looked at her, his expression softening. Now, I make up for lost time, he said firmly. I can't change the past, but I can be here for you now. Amelia smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in her eyes. And what about us, Logan? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Logan met her gaze, his heart aching with both regret and longing. I don't know if we can ever return to what we had, he admitted. But I know I still care about you, Amelia. I never stopped. Amelia's smile grew, the first genuine one he had seen from her in years. Then maybe we can start again. One step at a time. Logan nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in decades. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope for reconciliation, family, and a future no longer defined by loneliness and regret. The room fell into a comfortable silence, the air heavy with unspoken promises and tentative beginnings. For Logan, Claire, and Amelia, this was not just a moment of revelation. It was the start of a new chapter filled with the possibility of healing and redemption. The following morning, Logan woke up earlier than usual, his thoughts restless after the previous day's revelations. Sitting by the window of his penthouse, overlooking the city, he sipped his coffee and reflected on the events that had unfolded. He had built his life on a foundation of hard work and discipline, but now, for the first time, he realized how fragile his assumptions had been. By mid-morning, Logan was walking into his office, where Claire awaited him. She stood by the large bookshelf, her fingers lightly tracing the spines of the books. Good morning, Logan said, his voice soft. Claire turned and gave him a tentative smile. Good morning. Did you sleep well? Logan hesitated. Not really. I couldn't stop thinking about everything you and your mother told me. Claire nodded, her expression understanding. I didn't mean to turn your life upside down. I had to know. And now you do, Logan replied, walking over to join her. He placed a hand on the bookshelf, his fingers brushing against the same row of books she had touched. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for not being there for you. It wasn't your fault, Claire said firmly, her voice laced with emotion. We were both victims of circumstances neither of us could control. Logan looked at her, his heart aching. But I can't control what happens now. I want to be in your life, Claire. If you'll let me. Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. I'd like that. I've spent so many years wondering what it would be like to have a father. I want to know you. Logan reached out and gently pulled her into a hug. It was an unfamiliar gesture for him, but it felt right. As they embraced, a sense of warmth and belonging replaced the emptiness that had defined his life for so long. Later that afternoon, Logan and Claire returned to Amelia's home. The three of them sat in the living room, the tension from the previous day replaced by a tentative sense of peace. Amelia served tea, her movements graceful yet deliberate, as though she were trying to mask her nervousness. We need to talk about Sophia, Logan said, breaking the silence. Amelia sighed, placing the teapot down on the table. I haven't spoken to her in years. After she left, I tried to reach out, but she wanted nothing to do with me. Do you know where she is now? Logan asked. Amelia shook her head. The last I heard, she was in New York, but that was years ago. She could be anywhere by now. Claire frowned. Do you think she'd admit to what she did if we found her? Amelia hesitated, then nodded. Sophia always had a way of justifying her actions, but deep down, she knows what she did was wrong. Logan leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If we can find her, maybe we can get the full truth. I need to hear it from her. Amelia placed a hand on his arm. Logan, I don't need Sophia's confession to validate what we had. What matters is that we know the truth now. Logan looked at her, his expression softening. You're right, but it's not just about us. I want to make sure Claire understands everything, too. Claire nodded, her resolve evident. I want to know. I've spent my whole life with unanswered questions and don't want to leave any stone unturned. Logan smiled faintly, admiring her determination. Then we'll find her. Together. Amelia hesitated, then smiled. I never thought I'd see the day we'd be working together on something again. Logan's gaze softened. Maybe it's time we stopped living in the past and started building a future that includes all of us. Amelia's smile grew, and hope filled the room for the first time in years. They were no longer three individuals burdened by misunderstandings and lost time. They were a family, imperfect and fractured, but a family nonetheless. This was just the beginning of their journey. The road ahead was uncertain, but they were walking it together for the first time in decades, united by truth and the possibility of redemption. The decision to find Sophia set the trio on a new path filled with uncertainty and a sense of purpose. Logan, ever the strategist, took the lead. He hired a private investigator, a methodical and discreet woman named Elena Foster, who specialized in tracking down people from the past. Days turned into weeks, and Logan, Claire, and Amelia grew closer. Claire, who had initially been reserved, started to open up, sharing stories of her childhood. Logan listened intently, his heart aching for his missed milestones. Her first steps, school achievements, and birthdays celebrated without him. Amelia, too, began to soften around Logan. The walls she had built to protect herself from the pain of their separation started to crumble. They spent evenings reminiscing, laughing at memories that once seemed too bittersweet to recall. It was as if a tentative but genuine bond slowly replaced the years of misunderstanding and hurt. One afternoon, Elena called with news. I found Sophia, she said, her voice steady. She's living in a small town upstate, working as an art teacher at a local community center. Logan felt mixed emotions, relief, anger, and apprehension. Does she know we're looking for her? He asked. No, Elena replied. I wanted to confirm with you before making contact. Logan glanced at Amelia, who was sitting across from him. She nodded, her expression resolute. We're ready, she said. Logan, Amelia, and Claire drove upstate the next day to meet Sophia. The community center was a modest building surrounded by a garden of wildflowers. Children's laughter echoed from the open windows as they parked outside. Logan's chest tightened as he imagined the confrontation ahead. They found Sophia in a small art studio, guiding children through a painting exercise. Her once fiery red hair was now streaked with gray, but her posture remained confident, her voice firm yet kind as she instructed the kids. When she saw them standing in the doorway, her smile faltered. Amelia, she said, her voice tinged with surprise. Then her eyes shifted to Logan, and her expression hardened. What are you doing here? We need to talk, Amelia said, her tone steady but not unkind. It's important. Sophia hesitated, glancing at the children. Class is almost over. Wait for me outside. They waited on a bench near the garden, the tension palpable. Logan's mind raced with everything he wanted to say while Claire sat quietly, her hands gripping her knees. Finally, Sophia emerged, her arms crossed as she approached them. All right, she said, her tone defensive. What is this about? Logan stood, his voice measured but firm. It's about what happened 22 years ago. About the lies you told, the messages you sent, and how you tore us apart. Sophia's eyes narrowed. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, Amelia interjected, her voice trembling with emotion. You wrote that letter, didn't you? The one telling Logan I had fallen in love with someone else. Sophia's lips tightened, but she said nothing. And you erased my messages, Logan added. You made us believe we had abandoned each other. Sophia's composure cracked. I was trying to protect you, she snapped, her voice rising. Amelia, you were young and naive, throwing your life away for a man who cared more about his career than you. I did what I thought was best. Best for who? Amelia shot back, her voice filled with anger and pain. You stole my happiness, my chance at a family. You robbed Claire of her father. Sophia's gaze shifted to Claire, who stood beside her mother. I didn't mean for things to go this far, Sophia stammered, her voice softening. I thought you'd move on and find someone better. But I didn't, Amelia said, her voice breaking. I spent years grieving for what I lost. And Logan, he spent years believing I had betrayed him. You didn't protect me, Sophia. You destroyed me. Sophia's shoulders slumped, her eyes filling with tears. I thought I was doing the right thing, she whispered. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't just hurt her, Logan said, his voice cold. You hurt me. And you hurt Claire. Your actions had consequences, Sophia. Consequences we still live with. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Claire stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. You may have thought you were helping, but you weren't. You took away something I'll never get back, a childhood with my father. And you can't undo that. Sophia looked at Claire, her expression filled with guilt and regret. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. Amelia wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice soft but firm. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Sophia, but I must move on, for myself, Logan, and Claire. And I think you need to do the same. Sophia nodded, her face pale. If there's anything I can do to make this right. There isn't, Logan said bluntly, but acknowledging what you did is a start. Sophia nodded again, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she repeated, her voice breaking. As they left the community center, Logan felt a strange sense of closure. The truth had finally come to light, and while it didn't erase the pain of the past, it allowed him to begin imagining a future, one built on honesty, love, and the bonds they were now determined to rebuild. The drive back to the city was quiet, each lost in thought. The confrontation with Sophia had unearthed decades of pain, but it also brought a strange sense of relief. The truth, painful as it was, had finally been uncovered. Logan glanced at Claire in the rearview mirror. She was staring out of the window, her expression pensive. Claire, he said gently, breaking the silence, are you okay? She turned to look at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I think so, she said softly. I always imagined meeting my father would be this perfect moment, like something from a storybook. But life doesn't work that way, does it? Logan's chest tightened. No, it doesn't. But it doesn't mean we can't build something meaningful now. Claire nodded, her lips curving into a small, hopeful smile. I'd like that. Amelia, sitting beside Logan, reached for his hand. We've all been carrying this weight for too long. It's time we let it go and focused on what matters. Logan squeezed her hand, a silent promise passing between them. He had spent so many years chasing success, believing it would fill the void in his life. Now, he realized that true success lay in the connections he had neglected, connections he was determined to nurture moving forward. In the following weeks, Logan made every effort to become a part of Claire's life. He attended her art exhibitions, learned about her friends, and even joined her for Sunday brunches with Amelia. Their dynamic was awkward initially, but the barriers faded over time. One sunny afternoon, the three visited a park where Claire had loved to play as a child. As they walked among the blooming cherry blossoms, Logan marveled at how natural it felt to be with them. "Thank you," Claire said suddenly, breaking the silence. Logan looked at her, puzzled. "For what?" "For trying," she said simply. "For being here." Logan smiled, his heart swelling with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "Thank you for giving me the chance." Amelia watched them from a few steps ahead, her heart full. She had worried that the years of separation would create an insurmountable distance between Logan and Claire, but seeing them together now gave her hope. That evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Logan turned to Amelia. "I want to make this permanent," he said, his voice steady. "I want us to be a family." Amelia's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "So do I." Months later, Logan, Amelia, and Claire stood together at the entrance of a newly renovated art center. The building, funded by Logan, was dedicated to supporting young artists, providing them with resources and mentorship. Claire was named the center's director, a position she took with pride. The grand opening was a celebration of creativity, resilience, and unity. Friends, family, and community gathered to admire the artwork and enjoy the festivities. Amelia beamed with pride as she watched Claire interact with the young artists, her passion shining. Standing beside Amelia, Logan couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. For years, he had measured his worth by the numbers in his bank account and the accolades on his office wall. Now, he realized that his true wealth lay in the relationships he had rebuilt. Claire approached them with a glass of champagne as the evening wound down. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Logan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've always had it in you. We just helped you find the stage." Amelia smiled, looping her arm through Logan's. "You've come a long way, Logan. I think you've finally found what you were searching for." Logan looked at her, then at Claire. "I have," he said simply. The three stood together, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. They felt whole for the first time in decades, not because their past had been perfect, but because they had chosen to move forward together. As the night grew quieter, Logan raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. "To the family," Claire added. "To love," Amelia concluded. And with that, they stepped into the future, no longer defined by the pain of their past, but by the promise of what lay ahead.